Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Thunderstock Show, collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Today's guest is Nathan. He's calling from Idaho. Nathan has started and is on his from 3 to 4 ventures. It's a pretty crazy wild ride entrepreneurially. We have some interesting topics to discuss in terms of business growth, personal growth, and a whole world experience. So really excited to have you on, Nathan. First question I have is, so what did you always want to be when you grew up?
Hey, that's a fun question. When I was a kid, I watched Chariots of Fire and I fell in love with that movie, Chariots of Fire, and I wanted to run in the Olympics. And so I ran a lot. I did cross country and I did track and I loved to run. It felt like I was flying. And I was never good enough to make it to the Olympics, but that was one of the things that I wanted to do when I grew up. And I guess the second thing that I wanted to do when I was little is my grandma asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I wanted to be a church leader. And my God is really important to me, and my faith is really important to me. And being able to do something with my faith was something, even from a very young age, that was very motivating for me.
I hear often an analogy with entrepreneurship as it pertains to running, especially distances. And they liken it to it's a not a sprint, it's a marathon. But unlike marathons, entrepreneurs have to run and keep running and don't necessarily know when the final destination marker is when they arrive at their
Yeah.
goal. So they just need to fall in love with running, or else, they may stop before they get to the end goal. How has your pursuit of running helped you to develop into an entrepreneur, if it has?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So endurance running is what I liked to do. And I love to I liked the short distances too, but where I really specialized was in the long distances. And I had that endurance gene. And later in my life, I worked in the genealogy industry for one of my consulting clients. And I ended up doing two of those genealogy DNA tests for two different companies. And I actually found that there is a gene that all of the top fastest sprinters in the world have this one gene. And I found out I have the gene. And then I found out that there's a set of genes that work together that all of the top endurance athletes in the world generally have. And I found out I have that set of genes as well. And so I had some fun things in my favor for me when I was running. And that same concept applies. Just like I could keep running, I could keep enduring the long race on the track or the course. Same thing is true in business. I kind of feel like I can outwork anybody, and sometimes it just takes reps. Sometimes it just takes execution. Sometimes I hire people that feel like they've arrived in their careers and they feel like they don't have to put in the hours, they don't have to put in the effort, they don't have to.
Mm.
And doesn't matter what you've done in your life if you're not willing to put in the reps, if you're not willing to get it done and make it happen, it's probably going to be pretty hard for you to be successful. So I agree. I think that endurance attribute translates really well to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's such an interesting frame. I also would say, not only do you think you have the experience of out enduring, but to a certain degree, the mental or spiritual part of entrepreneurship I found is that there's a lot of faith that's required. So I've heard it said that the opposite of faith is certainty. And one thing for certain, and at least my experience as an entrepreneur, is that I have had never been certain. I believed that things would work out, and they may not have worked out as previously planned. But I think the quickest way for someone to be a failure in entrepreneurship is to quit too soon or to
Yeah.
lose faith, typically as consequence of losing faith. So, how has that your faith and your relationship with God served you in entrepreneurship?
Everything I have achieved is credited to him. There's no success I've ever had that is not a direct result of what he's done for me. There's no way I could have achieved any of these successes without God. I praise him. I will praise him. I will glory him. I will honor him. I will give him credit until the day I die. And I have a show about faith. I have a couple of shows that I run, and one of them is called Why We Believe. And on
Hmm.
that show, I people tell their stories of faith and conversion and testimony. And it's amazing how almost all of them come back to something hard that they went through in their life and how they turned to God and God was there for them and God helped them through this really hard thing in their life. And as an entrepreneur, that's like every single day. And we choose to turn to God. And I have a really strong witness that when we choose to turn to God and we're doing his work, that he will bless us and he will help us. And I'll tell you a story. When I was a young entrepreneur, starting my very first business, I was in college and I won the university business plan competition and I got just a little bit of money and we started this thing and I applied for every credit card I could and I maxed out my credit cards, which I do not recommend that anybody do, especially as a college student. And I had applied for extensions on these credit cards and been denied. And one day I came home on a Thursday night and payday was Friday, and I had no money in the bank. I had nothing to pay payroll the next
Nothing
day.
but faith.
Yeah. And I was working late. I came home late and checked the mail. There was a letter in the mail that says, "We've just extended your credit." And it was by exactly enough, just enough for me to cover that payroll the next day. And I got through it and we survived and we grew that company to be something the Walt Disney Internet Group tried to buy from us. And we ended up selling to somebody else for millions and millions of dollars. And we never would have made it without God being there for us at our moment. And we obviously have to do our part, right? We've got to follow him. We've got to
Sure.
keep his commandments. We've got to be men of God and be faithful and do our best. We'll never be perfect, but we've got to repent and keep trying. And when we involve him, we and we're doing his work, we can merit his help. And I've seen it over and over and over again in my career. And like I said, I'll praise him forever because of it.
Well, I'm glad I asked you that question.
Yeah.
Not to make light of it, but that's very powerful, and I appreciate you sharing. And one thing that has been a recurring, I love the frame that success leaves clues, and a lot of the most successful people are some of the least centric or egotistical people. And when I think of the word humility, I don't think it means to think less of oneself as much as I think it means to think more of others. And who more to humble yourself, who better to humble yourself to than God? And I forget where this quote came from. Excuse if I misquote, but it's like those who humble themselves become exalted, and those who exalt themselves become humbled. So
Yeah.
you can either do it voluntarily or do it
Yeah.
the hard way.
I've made the mistake in my life of praying for faith a couple or sorry, praying for humility a couple of times. And I promise you that
And you
is a
got it.
prayer God will answer that prayer. And that is a hard sometimes is really, really hard to go through it. You have to go through to get that humility. It's a lot better if we can humble ourselves and don't have to go through the hard things where humility is forced upon us.
Yeah. So I'll share a quick story. Some people may have heard parts of this, but I don't think I ever shared it in this frame. When when I started my most recent entrepreneurial journey, I just was coming off of a pretty decent win, in my lifetime. That was a career defining milestone, like great time. Exited a P firm that I co-founded, and I just thought I was awesome, right? I thought me, Ross, personally, I am good, right? And then, which was a silly thing to think, because then I lost my grandmother, godmother, and mother within 90 days, tore my ACL, and couldn't literally was like humbled to my knees. I couldn't walk with a newborn daughter on the way. And then that was probably the key moment where I turned to God and I was like, well, down on my knees, like, I don't know what to do. I'm not as awesome as I thought. And then life, like after I kind of gave up that this was all about me and, for whatever reason, like going through the hard time was one of the greatest blessings, I guess, in the long run.
Yeah.
So, do you have a moment in your journey, you know, whether that was just, it's always been a part of you, faith, or whether something really tough happened to have you double down on it and make it? You did share about the payroll paycheck, but I assume that may have been before that you had faith.
Yeah. Yeah, there have been so many times. And before I go there, I wanna make one more comment about the humility thing. I know that God will answer the prayer, and I know if we choose to humble ourselves, God will lift us up. In fact, if you go to James, James is the book of scripture that resonates the most with me. And in James 4:10, it says, "Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up." So we've got a
Mm.
promise right there from God. If we want to be lifted up, we have to turn and humble ourselves before him. Hopefully we can do it ourselves and he doesn't have to force it on us.
Yep. Agreed.
All right, so you're talking about a time that I've had to turn to God.
Or
And
the origination. Have you always like how has your faith developed? Like,
where did it first start?
yeah,
Okay, wow. I don't know if you want me to go into this. um
as long as you're
I
cool with it.
Yeah, for sure. I've always believed. I grew up in a home that believed in God, and I grew up with parents that taught me about God, and I learned from a very early age, and I always believed. And there were some moments in my life, and I had the blessing of, like, feeling him near me, like, feeling the Holy Ghost, the Spirit as a companion with me through my life. And so when there were times that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, I could feel his presence leave me. I could know that I
Mm,
wasn't on the right path and I needed to fix something. I remember one time when I was in high school, I felt that I just wasn't feeling him close to me and something was feeling wrong. And so it was one night, I can visualize this in my mind. We had this, we lived in a small house and there was this hallway with a light in the middle of the hallway. And so I was sitting, everyone else had gone to bed. I was sitting there reading my scriptures and I just opened up my scriptures and it's like, okay, something's wrong. I don't know how to feel it. I don't know how to solve it. And I opened up this scripture in Thessalonians that just says, and in all things give thanks unto God, for that is the will of the Lord God for you. And I just paraphrased it. I'm sure I didn't get it exactly right.
mhm,
And that would just profoundly hit me, the power of gratitude. And I shifted my mindset. And that's affected the rest of my life.
hmm,
And when I pray now, I try to say a lot more prayers of gratitude where I'm not just asking God for what I need, but I'm thanking him for things that he's doing. And when I'm
mm.
stressed and I'm feeling anxiety and I'm feeling overwhelmed, a lot of times I'll just lay there and I'll just focus on gratitude for all that God's done for me. And there is a power in gratitude. When we focus on acknowledging God and thanking him for the hand that he's played in our life, we unlock um, a power from heavens far greater than just asking for what we need. I don't know. That's a time that just it's just a simple moment, just opening scriptures and turning to one verse to just profoundly change the rest of my life. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was a great answer, and I wanna come back and t what you just said. So I grew up you were into distance running, I was a wrestler. That
Mhm.
was my big passion as a in fact, the only thing I knew I wanted to do when I got older was coach wrestling and wrestle in college. So
Oh, that's fun. Did you do it?
I wrestled in college and I did coach wrestling for years, mostly before children when I had more time to do so and really invest it. But one thing that was transformative for me was that I had a practice partner and good friend who wrestled at Penn State. And this was around the time that Cale Sanderson transferred there. He was from Utah and he completely first thing he did was change the culture. What they started doing was like the catchphrase I learned from him was the attitude of gratitude
Yeah.
was attitude of gratitude was like core value number one. And what they would do is they would celebrate the national championship before they would do it, like by having cake and giving thanks and just being like appreciative of being there to compete to the best of ability with one another. As the journey was the reward, the challenge was the reward. And then they've been the most successful program in college wrestling history with producing the most successful wrestlers in United States history.
Yeah.
And he's like it's a prerequisite that you have to buy into, attitude of gratitude. Like
Yep.
every it's infectious, even to me who wasn't on the team, but I had a friend that was, and, again, success leaves clues, and I think that for everyone listening, like, even when you just say thanks to if someone does something nice for you, as simple as just saying, "Thank you. I appreciate you." Like,
Yeah. My
anyway.
favorite signature lines are either "Thanks, Nathan," or, "Gratefully, Nathan," right? Just making sure
Mm.
we're constantly expressing gratitude. And when we do that, we'll find there's constantly things to be thankful for that we're not even paying attention to.
Yeah, it's funny, when you look for something, you find it.
Yeah.
So so I wanna pivot. Man, we went really deep, and it was awesome about, faith and running, but then how did it start transforming for you in business? Like, what was the first foray into, maybe this is for me, maybe this is my purpose or part of my purpose?
Yeah, so I think so when I was in college, after my freshman year at BYU, I decided I wanted to be a missionary. And I dropped out of college, took a leave for 2 years, and I went to Brazil. And I was a volunteer missionary teaching people about Jesus Christ, helping strengthen families. And while I was there, so a couple of interesting points. Years later, when I was coming back, I found a little journal that I was writing on my mission, and I found an entry as I was coming home from my mission. And I said in that, I want to find something where I can be paid based upon how hard I work, and how well I work, and not based upon how many hours I work. And that affected me, right, on my mission where I developed that, and that was the thought coming back from my mission, right? That was one thought. The second thought on my mission is I fell in love with these kids, these street kids in Brazil that would constantly come up to me and ask me for money. And as a volunteer missionary, the money in my pockets ran out really fast. And I
Mhm.
vowed that I would do something to make a lasting difference in their lives when they came back. And
Mm.
before my mission, I I never even heard of the internet, not one time. It was this I left in 1993 on my mission. And when I came back in 1995, the internet had exploded. So I was in Brazil during that explosion. And I came back and everything was the internet. It felt like homesteading, right? Back in the early days, you could go and find a piece of land and just settle it. And if you did a good job and you took care of it and you did it long enough, you could own the land. And that's how the internet felt back then. You just had to pick your niche and you had to do a good job at it and be consistent and do it long enough and you could own that niche. And so I wrote a business plan on how to help children through adoption on the internet, using the internet, and it won a couple of business plan competitions. This is back in
This is the mid-90s.
1997. Yeah,
97.
1997, yeah. And so I started adoption.com, and I spent more than 20 years of my life working with adoption.com, and we grew that to become the world's most used adoption platform. Um, I
Aren't you
one of the
glad so I hate to interrupt you, but this is a
Yeah,
really powerful question. Aren't you glad that you did the mission and trip versus staying in school? Had you
yeah,
listened
yeah,
to your calling or higher whatever you wanna call that?
yeah,
Wow,
absolutely.
that's wild.
And working at adoption.com, I felt like I was like working in a Hallmark movie, you know? It was so amazing to be able to help children find homes and families infertile families find kids and helping reunite adoptees and birth parents that didn't know each other and like all of these different things that I was so blessed to be part of. I felt that I was doing God's work throughout that whole journey from day 1 until the very last day I was there. And I feel that when we're on God's errand, we're entitled to God's assistance, right? We
Hmm.
need to live faithfully and we need to ask for it. We need to do our part. If we want God's help, I think an important part is making sure we're on his errand, making sure we're doing things to help people. We're doing things to make the world a better place, to do what he would do if he was here. And if we're willing to do his work in the ventures we're creating and we can get his help. And even in a space like podcasting, right now I've built a podcasting platform, but we've committed 10% of our profits to charitable causes. And that was part of day 1 before we ever did anything. We wanted to do his work.
That was in the operating agreement, just so to
It
speak.
was. It was right there from the very beginning. And you focus on what charities you can help and what causes you can get behind and who needs a voice. And we wanted to be aligned with God's will right
You
from the
know,
beginning.
something that viewers have talked to me about, and I've had this conversation more than once, Nathan, is I wanna be an entrepreneur, but I don't know what I wanna do. And your frame of living in accordance with your faith and helping people and, just like lifting others up. There's a lot of other things that you said in there, but it almost sounds like your purpose, at least your errands, in your words, was like obvious to you. And I feel like it's a shame that it's not as obvious to others. And sometimes, I have to admit, sometimes it's hard to figure it out for myself as a marketer. So, what can you say to people that may not know what their errand is and how to connect with it?
I've had a lot of people ask me that question, and I've come up with an answer to it that I really like. So think of a Venn diagram where you have
Mhm,
3 circles that overlap, right? And you got that point in the middle. One of the circles is what you are really good at. Okay?
mhm.
What talents has God given you? Okay? Identify those and write those down and put those in that circle. Okay? The other circle across the top is what you love, what resonates with your soul. A lot of times I talk to people and they're like, I'm so crazy passionate about X, or I just really feel like I have to do X. That's what I'm talking about. You find those things like when I got back from my mission and I'm like, I got to help these kids. right? As God putting something in my soul, right? So that's what goes in the second box, right? What are you crazy passionate about? Okay, what are you really good at? What are you crazy passionate about? And then the third one is what can give you the lifestyle that you need
Mm,
so that what you're creating is sustainable. Now, that doesn't have to be the thing that makes the most money. Adoption did not make tons and tons of money, right? It's not a high dollar industry.
right. It's not
But
for profit adoption. Like you're
that's
not trying to maximize your lifetime value per adopted transaction. I don't mean to make a joke of it, but I'm just
yeah, that's
hammering
right.
home that point.
But it did make enough money that I could provide the lifestyle that I needed for myself and the people that I love, right? It was sufficient. I didn't need to be on Wall Street making tens of millions of dollars a year, right? I worked for me and what I was trying to create for my family. I live in rural Idaho. I love living near Yellowstone. I love knowing every single one of my neighbors and loving every single one of my neighbors. Like I like being out and knowing my community and being part of my community. Like I needed a different kind of life. I didn't need a New York City lifestyle,
Right.
right? And okay, so you find those three things. What are you super talented? What is the gift that God's given you? Second one is what has God made to resonate in your soul? What are you so passionate about? And then number three is what can give you the lifestyle you need so that you can sustainably do this work, right? And so if you fill out those three boxes, where those three overlap, where you find those things that are in all three of those boxes, that usually is the best thing for you to pursue. And if you take people through that exercise, they usually can easily narrow down the things that or find the things that are going to work best for them. And also, I think we shouldn't start businesses without going to God and asking him, like, is this the right thing that I should do? Is this the right direction? Is this where you'd have me use my talents and resources that you've given me to
Yeah, that fourth point, Nathan, that really separates. Like, I love the way you framed the Venn diagram because there's a book out there that kind of helped me in a way, but it was disassociated from faith. It's called Ikigai, and it was similar with Venn diagrams and overlapping. And they were not the ones that you said; they're different. But when you, in marketing terms, it's like gathering market feedback, right? Whether that's beta testing or going to your market to say, hey, questionnaires. But the first person's feedback that sometimes is again, if you're just praying for things to receive versus, really listening, like getting feedback from God on your entrepreneurial journey is, I think, I don't know.
and he will give those
What
kind
an
of
idea.
answers.
Yeah.
He does answer those kinds of prayers, I promise.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad I asked the question. Adoption.com, 20 years to today, you're on your fourth venture. There have been a few ventures in between adoption.com and today. Can you walk me through the transition from one to two, then two to now?
And I did adoption.com for a long time, and I did some ventures in the middle of adoption.com. I've also done several consulting ventures
Okay.
in between as well. So I've helped other people build their ventures. I helped David Neeleman. If you know him, he's built 5 airlines, like Airlines is one of his. So I've helped him do
Wow.
2 of his ventures. Um, so transition from one to another. So when I was doing adoption.com, I was having some partnership conflicts, and I got to a spot where I was not really enjoying coming into work every day, and I was trying to do some growth things, and I had a partner that was not supportive of those growth things, and it kind of took all the wind out of my sails, kind of took all the fun out of
Mm,
trying to build and grow. And which is a great way to kill an entrepreneur, right? And so I hired somebody else to take my place as a COO. I still was the CEO and still retained my ownership, but I stepped out of the business day to day. And I had dropped out of school after my junior year in college after I'd started that first adoption.com business. And it took me 10 years to go back. And so I decided I'm going to step away, and adoption.com was cash flowing, making enough that I could go back to school and still get enough money out of the business that I could provide for my family. And so I decided to reinvest in me. And so I finished my undergraduate and I did my MBA, and I did something kind of weird that I've never heard of anybody doing this before, but it really worked for me. Because I started my first business in college, I was always the CEO. I was
Mm,
always the guy in charge. And so I never had the opportunity to learn from other great entrepreneurs. Where normally you go work from someone else and you learn and then you go start your business, I'd kind of done it backwards. And so I decided that I identified 4 crazy successful entrepreneurs that I really respected, that I wanted to learn from. And I went and I worked for all 4 of those entrepreneurs. And I went and did projects for them. So like David Neeleman, who started 5 airlines, I went and did 2 ventures with him. Um, and Clark Gilbert, who was a professor of entrepreneurship at Harvard and then ran a newspaper and a television station and a radio station in Utah. He's probably the person I respect most of anybody on earth. And I went and worked for him and did ventures for him. And I worked for Paul Allen. He did myfamily.com and ancestry.com. He was this digital genius. And I went and did 2 ventures for him and then Carlos Martins, he's a billionaire down in Brazil, and I speak Portuguese. I served my mission in Brazil, and so I've done 5 ventures in Brazil now, and so I went and I learned from these people that were wildly more successful than me, and I did projects for them with their resources, but I got to learn from them. Right, I got to have offices right next to some of these guys. I got to just spend ridiculous amounts of time with some of these people, and so with the education, the formal college education, plus being able to go work for those 4 men gave me the foundation that I was then able to jump back in and go do my ventures again at a whole different level than what I had been doing them before.
I am experiencing a paradigm shift on investing in oneself because I've never thought of, like many people who are listening or are out there I've talked to. Like you said, most people spend their earlier years working for somebody else, going to school, so that then they can not have a boss, so that they can
Yeah.
be the CEO. But talk about, from what I understand from your story, it was some of the most transformative learning experiences, some of the most, the way to invest in yourself is to invest in others. And for you to, I don't want to, how do I say this without coming across as if I'm exalting you, but you humbled yourself insofar as you're like, I don't need to be the CEO. I need to find people that I really respect and admire and help them to accomplish their mission. If people looked at their careers that frame, we would have a lot less conflict between the employer employee relationship. And I'm sure, if I had to make a wild guess, that they were like, Nathan, come on board. We'd love to have you, happy to work with you.
Yeah, that's the advantage of being an entrepreneur first is you hit a home run first, and then it's real easy to go work for somebody else. They're kinda happy to take you on.
So what are some of the, I mean, you named 4 remarkable individuals that you helped underneath
And they
there,
helped me far more than I helped them. Like, it
but
was
what
very
what are some of
mutually
the
beneficial.
were there any like key, learnings? Obviously there were many, but like what are some of the lessons working for them that you might not have had when you were the CEO that when you go off and do your own ventures later that really stuck and were transformative?
Yeah, there were a lot of those. David Neeleman is brilliant. I mean, who can create 5 different airlines? Like, he's just so successful. Like, Azul, when we did that, and he's the fastest growing airline in aviation history at that time. He doesn't just create airlines, he creates wild success in airlines. And he has ADHD. And he manages it without medicine, and he's learned how to manage that, and actually that contributes to his superpower. I've learned since then, like, a lot of times you look at people with ADHD and you're like, oh,
Like
maybe they've got,
myself.
yeah, like me. I'm sure I have it too. And we might say, well, I've got a disability or I've got a, something's wrong with me. But maybe God gave us that situation because it gives us the specific attributes, the specific ability to focus on things, the specific ability to, persevere and endure through certain things. I think a lot of entrepreneurs have ADHD and a lot of entrepreneurs have OCD. They're very common traits and skill
It's a
sets.
feature, not a bug.
Yeah, I think so. And I just learned from that you don't have to limit yourself by that, and you can use the attributes of that to help yourself succeed. Yeah, he faced some adversity. I was working for him, running one of his ventures, leading one of his ventures when he got fired from JetBlue. And then he ended up a year later, he ended up starting Azul, this Brazilian airline, and he knew I spoke Portuguese, and so he hired me to go do that with him. I've learned this from 2 of the people that I worked for, they had their businesses kind of taken away from them. They built businesses, and then investors that invested kind of kicked them out and they lost. I learned the power of, just because you're the founder doesn't mean you're going to keep control of your company. There are people that are not entrepreneurs,
I
and those people will invest in you and let you build it, and then if they can get control of the company, they will seize control of the company from you, and it's a
what
horrible situation for entrepreneurs.
One
And so
one
as
of my
entre
favorite clients, sorry, I have to get this off
yeah,
because
go
you'll
for it.
relate to this. My favorite clients of all time, his name Matthew. He and his father were in the church, so they were pastors and whatnot, and they decided that they wanted to do a faith driven alternative to healthcare. This was during like '08 to 2012, like the Obamacare. Like you said, they just were on a mission to help people figure out their medical bills during this wild time, and it grew to a $600 million nonprofit. And then they got edged out by people that were, not
Yep.
the founders, not them. And anyway, that story to me is what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that happens all the time to successful founders. So you need to go in planning and protecting yourself from that. You don't want to put your heart and soul into building something that then is going to get seized from you. And so make sure you structure it accordingly for it not to happen. If you're thinking about doing a 50-50 partnership, I'll tell you right now, don't. Like, it's just not worth it. Someone's got to be able to make the decision.
So, okay, on that note, you navigated partner conflict in a way that would end up being supremely great because you got to go back and reinvest in yourself with school and working for these other people. What advice can you give to people that are in partnerships that may be 50-50, or they may be, those feelings where they're like, I don't like go to work anymore. It's because I have a strained relationship with the other
Yeah.
partner.
Yeah.
What frame would be helpful for, because I'm sure there's gonna be someone listening that might relate to that, and I know a couple people that can relate to that.
Best advice I can give you is I'll tell you a story. The best answers are
Love
stories.
it.
So I had two really good friends. I had two friends named Josh James and John Pastana. And I just knew them from college. They were acquaintances. They weren't great friends, but I knew them from college. And while they were in college, they were running a computer called, running, and they ended up selling mycomputer.com. And they took, I don't remember how much, like 10 million or 15 million. I don't remember the exact amount, but they had a good little exit from it. And then they went and started a company called Omniture. They used the 10 million or $15 million that they got from their first exit, and they started Omniture. And Omniture sold to Adobe for $1.8 billion. They never could have started Omniture if they hadn't have gotten that 10 to $15 million from my computer. And so a lot of times we as entrepreneurs think that this business we've created is the one and we can't let go of it. And sometimes if you're in a bad situation and it's not going to get you where you want to be and it's not where you want to spend your whole life, life is short. Go sell the business, go take the money, and then go sell your mycomputer.com and go create your Omniture. And once you've had a success with your first business and you have the capital to put into the second business, and you have this credibility from the first business, it is so much easier to create that second business. So sometimes we think we're
Mm,
giving away
yes.
something by walking away from a bad situation. But usually, if you do it right, you can often get into a much better situation.
And that
So,
goes back to being a test of faith almost, right? And like the fear of loss versus like surrendering that fear to then take the next step. That's like 100xing your valuation by just like being faithful. I mean, there's more to it than that, but
yeah.
if people knew with certainty on the other side that you could 100x your next time around, of course, but then that's what that defeats the point of faith, right? You can't have certainty.
Or even if you can't 100x it the next time, let's say you can
Sure.
only just recreate what you did the first time, but then you own it 100%, right?
Yes. Yes. And you're happy.
Yeah, that's right. You can create it the way that resonates with your soul, right?
And that's the frame of the best is yet to come. I think that's, I mean, a great example of it. So speaking of which, I want to go into two topics that we've discussed that I need to focus on now, which is um, you have coined these terms: credibility marketing and passion marketing.
Yeah.
From talking with you, you exude both. So whichever you like to start with, whether it's the concept of credibility marketing or passion marketing, I want to hammer how those two frames came to be and what they mean to people listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's start with passion marketing. I think that's a great place. So I gave a TED talk on this. If you go look up my name and TEDx, you can see this talk. And I started developing this concept when I was working for David Neeleman. When I was working for David Neeleman and I was down in Brazil, and he had hired me to kind of develop and implement digital marketing strategy for him for this new airline. We created a Brazilian travel social network, and Facebook was pretty new down in Brazil. It was very new. And at the time, Orca was the big social network in Brazil.
Hmm?
But we knew how Facebook had dominated in the United States and in these other markets. And we decided to not focus anything on Orca and to focus everything on Facebook. We were going to kind of ride Facebook to success. And so we decided to launch our Facebook strategy. But I'm a firm believer in iteration and testing, 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 testing. And so we didn't just create a Facebook page. We created 100 Facebook pages for him. Okay. And we promoted 100 Facebook pages. And we were testing what would work, what would not work, what would resonate with our audience, what would be the engagement and the conversion, and what would resonate with, there were a lot of things we were looking for. And very quickly, within a month or so, we found 3 of those pages that far outperformed everything else. And so we turned off 97 Facebook pages, and we doubled down, tripled down on those 3 Facebook pages. And we got to where half of all of the Facebook users in Brazil were following Azul Airlines on Facebook.
What?
Yeah, we had a very successful Facebook strategy. And that was one of the pieces that helped them become the fastest growing airline in aviation history. But we only were able to find the 3 pages because we tested 100 pages. I'll give you another example of this. I've been building this software for 6 years, and Black Friday, just 2 months ago, we started promoting the DIY version of the software. For the first time, we did a big ad campaign for our software, but we just didn't put live an ad campaign. We put live almost about 1,000 ad campaigns on different platforms, targeting different audiences, different types of ads, different in the different one, 13 different videos to this audience on this platform. And we did crazy amounts of testing. Okay. To get my first free trial conversion, my first person to sign up with a free trial, it cost me $4,780. I had the hugest knot in my stomach. Like, I thought we'd invested $5.8 million in this software company. And I felt at that moment that I didn't have a company. Like, I felt that I had just proven that I was going to have to fold my business, right? Because the cost of that one free trial subscriber cost me more than the lifetime value of the customer. And my blood pressure was high, my knot in my stomach, I couldn't sleep, and then the ads keep running, and the ads keep running. And we soon find out, wow, this platform doesn't give us any conversions, but this one does. Okay, turn this one off, right? We tested these 33 audiences. These 27 audiences don't work, but these 5 audiences are giving you conversion. These 17 ads aren't working, but these 4 ads are working. And pretty soon we know exactly which platforms work. Pretty soon we know exactly which ads perform the best and convert the best. Pretty soon we know, which audiences we should be targeting those ads to. And by the last week of the campaign, we're doing like $150 per sign up.
Oh my goodness.
So we never would have figured that out if we hadn't have done a freaking 1,000 ads, right? The only
Well,
way
that's
is we would have given up. If we would have only just tried it that first week and tried the platform that didn't work, we probably would have folded as a company. But because we were willing to go in and do ridiculous iteration, we know what works. We know our audience, we know our ads, we know our messaging, we know, how to target it now. And we have a business. We have a money machine now.
I apologize if I seem too shocked and in awe, but there's a popular image or meme out there of 2 people mining for diamonds, and one gives up right before he strikes, the other one doesn't. And it sounds like that story is that meme where it's like, hey, we're going to do what is required, not what feels possible, right? Because at the time, the fact that you did 1,000 different ads tells me that when I'm from a fractional CMO, like marketing standpoint, we just simply don't have enough data oftentimes as a problem.
That's right.
To your degree, like
And
Thomas
going back,
Edison didn't fail 999 times before he had a light bulb. He just figured out on the thousandth time what really worked.
that's
And
right.
that's the same with your ad campaign.
And going back to the original point you made at the beginning of this interview about the connection between an endurance athlete and an entrepreneur. And there is a lot of correlation. If you look at really successful CEOs, a lot of them are endurance athletes. A lot of them do triathlons. A lot of them do marathons. A lot of them do low de jas in these crazy distance cycling races, right? Because they have that attribute. They're willing to pay the price to get to the place that they want to go to. And when you run an ad campaign, are you willing to pay the price, or do you just take the easy route and you just throw up an ad campaign? Right. And if you just throw up an ad campaign, you may get it right. You may have that one ad campaign and you may be lucky you're targeting the right audience and you may just get it right. But it's probably like a 1 in 100 or 1 in 500 chance that you get it right. And if you don't get it right, you may have a false negative where your test is wrong, not because your product is wrong, but just because you didn't test the right ad to the right audience on the right platform.
So, and I will make one last comment on that. It's like, but you were passionate about the mission. You were passionate about making it work. It wasn't just a paycheck. It wasn't just a job. Like you weren't just clocking in and wasting time. And I think that that's almost a prerequisite for a lot of people to like have that fuel to keep going when you don't get that external validation, any certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a great story about passion marketing. Tell me about credibility.
So the reason that worked with passion marketing, sorry,
No,
is
go ahead.
this is how we discovered it. The ones that did the best were called Eu Amo Brasil, which is I love Brazil in Portuguese, and Eu Amo a Viajar, which is I love to travel in Portuguese. And I learned that by putting the I love and finding the level 10 passion, this crazy passion of people, my marketing did better. So then I started expanding that concept. So then I went and worked for this company called Deseret Digital Media. And so they bought my business. They were a newspaper, radio station, television station, and I had this company that was building digital platforms for people. And they bought my company and they said, "We're hiring you to build digital platforms for us. We don't know what it's going to be yet." There was no specific platform they were asking me to build. They said, "Go do the research, write the business plan, tell us what to write, what to create, get it approved, and then we'll give you a budget and you go create it for us." They wanted an entrepreneur. And so I did that. And the very first step that I did was to find the passion statements. Just like I had found the I love Brazil and I love to travel passion statements at Azul, I wanted to find those for this audience, for the newspaper. And so I used the Toyota 5 Whys. You know how Toyota has that exercise and you ask a question like, why would you buy this product and service? And whatever their answer is, you turn it into a question and you ask it again. And you get to the fifth answer and it evokes like the core motivation why someone does something. Like at adoption.com, right? I had a designer once who created a brochure for me, and the brochure was about adoption service, and the brochure said "want to adopt," right? And that's like why would you use our service? Because I want to adopt. Like that's the first answer. But then I asked 5 questions, and I found the fifth answer to that, and the answer was why? Because I have a hole in my heart that I don't
Mm.
believe can be filled any other way. Right. And you feel how it's just so much deeper, right? It's the core motive, the core reason. So, anyways,
Oh, man.
when I was at Deseret Digital Media, we did those passion statements. We found that their target audience, their level 10 passions were things like, I want a more loving marriage. I want my children to feel my love. I love Jesus Christ. I love BYU sports, those kinds of things, right? And so instead of building around the brands that nobody cared about, that were like level 2 passions, we built these channels around those level 10 passions. And then so Facebook pages and social channels and websites and things like that. And then we started building content around those level 10 passions. And when I started, that company had less than 100,000 social follows. We grew them to more than 130 million social followers, a 1,200% growth. We didn't just grow followers, but because people were so much more passionate about it, they engaged so much more. We reached 40 million comments, likes, and shares per month According to Unmetric, we had more engagement than any publisher in the world back then using passion marketing. Passion marketing is the most effective social strategy in the world. If you go back and you look at the data, I don't believe there's a more effective social strategy that's ever been rolled out other than passion marketing. So we did that for them, and we built these platforms in these different countries of these family related sites. Like in the US, it was called Family Share, and then I think today it's called Family Today. We built one in Spanish that was familias.com. In Brazil, it was familia.com.br. Anyways, and we reached 280 million monthly uniques because we're focused. We built the whole venture around the highest level passions of the target audience. When I do ventures for people now, that's the first step you do is you've got to identify who's your audience and then what are the highest passions that are driving their lives. And then you build everything around.
So going back to your 3 Venn diagrams of what are your gifts, what can help afford your lifestyle, and what is your passion, what is your errand, what is your mission you feel compelled to. It might be obvious to some marketers or business people what your gifts are. It might be obvious to some people what the monetization part of that, like what you're selling, the offer. But when you double down, triple down, 100 times down on your passion, that's how you that's how you make the impact.
Well,
Really? Like
so
that Venn diagram, you have to go hunting. And when you find it, that's where the gold is.
and part of the reason why you have to do this is and I've only got like 3 minutes left. I would love to schedule a follow-up call if you want to do a second
I would
interview,
love that.
but I'm going to have to jump in 3. So let me keep going on passion and we'll schedule a follow-up to talk about credibility because that's a whole conversation in itself. That's even more important than passion. I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. What were we just saying?
We were hammering home the degree of passion and
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. When I was a kid, and I'm not even that old. When I was a kid growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, Tempe, Arizona, we only had 4 TV stations. And when I wanted to watch something on TV, I had 4 choices. I remember being so excited when the 5th TV station came out. It was channel 45 there. When I wanted to buy something, right, I would save up my money and then I would go to Fiesta Mall. And there was a mall and there maybe have been 40 stores and I could go pick a store and go buy a t-shirt at the store, right? And I only had a few choices of what I could buy, right? Today, if I have an extra hour and I can watch something on TV, how many things are there that how many choices do I have?
unlimited
Yeah,
options.
hundreds of millions of choices, like all the streaming options that I have, all the cable options, all the archived, everything that's there. And if I have an extra dollar today that I can go buy something with, how many choices do I have of what I can spend that
Unlimited.
dollar on?
Yeah.
Yeah, just Amazon.com, one website has 300 million products, and that's one website. So it used to be when I started my first business almost 30 years ago, the way that people used to run businesses is they would create a good product and then they would buy ads and they would tell the world how their product was so great, right?
Right.
The
Right.
the problem is today, 96% of people don't trust ads.
Mm.
And so if you just decide to run ads and tell the world your good product is amazing, it's probably not going to work. If you just create a good product, it's probably not going to work because they have too many other choices of what they could do with that extra dollar and that extra hour. So instead, the way to solve that is we have to find the level 10 passion. We have to find the thing that is driving their lives. We all have time and we all have money for our level 10 passions. And so you find the level 10 passion of your target audience and you build your business around that. And then you become a priority. You become a level 10 passion in their lives.
I would love the opportunity to have another episode with you and continue the conversation because I feel like we both have more we could contribute and say. I must though ask you for leave a question, ask a question. My favorite.
Yes.
We can do it speed round. Question for you. I don't believe in coincidences. Question for you is how are you going to balance success and fulfillment? And I think you've already answered this in your own life, but for the audience, how do you balance success and fulfillment?
You do it every day. You don't wait for a time in the future, but you make time. If you know Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I watched that video today again, where you put in the big rocks first, and then you let the little rocks fill around it. You schedule in the things that matter, put them in your calendar, and then you let all those things that matter less, that are lower priorities, fit in around the things that matter most. Schedule in going to church. It is on my calendar. Schedule in a date night with your wife. It is on my calendar, right? Those things that matter, put them in first, not last. because there will never be time for them later. You got to get them in before your schedule gets consumed by the thick of thin things.
Startadoption.com or go on your mission trip while you're in college.
Yeah.
Now, what question do you have for the next guest? Anything.
How have you seen the hand of God in your life this week?
Boom. That for everyone listening, I want you to ask yourself that question. And for Nathan and all listeners, I appreciate the time. I'm very thankful spent with us during this conversation. I don't run ads in the show, but again, the only thing I ask is that you share it with a friend if you found value. Until next time, be well. Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks for having me on, Ross.